Make sure this was recording. Okay, today we're sitting down with Stephen Salyers. I am so excited to hear even more about you. Like, I have to tell you how I came to know you because, and I don't know if I've ever actually told you this, but today is actually my 7-year anniversary of moving to Nashville. And
Congrats.
on my way driving to Nashville, the song that I played on repeat for almost like 6 hours was Avicii's Don't Wake Me Up. And I love that song. It was just like my vibe of moving and something new. And then when I got here and I was looking for a church, or actually I wasn't even looking for a church, but somebody invited me to go to Crosspoint. And the very first service, you sang that song. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, this is my place. Like, this is awesome. One, it's not like a Christian song. And two, here's this dude like rocking this. And then I worked at the listening room and you sang, oh crap, why did my brain just go blank?
The problem with here?
Yes, yes, that one. And then I'd be like, oh, please play that. And I still have that on my favorites list that I listen to quite often. So I was very excited. The very first shoot we did in 2018, you came. And so you were part of this from the beginning before it was even a 501c3, whatever it is that it's called, a nonprofit. And then you just did the Valentine's Day one too. So I really admire what you're doing. I follow you. I think you have a really positive outlook on life. I think you have a lot to say, and I cannot wait to hear more. So I'm going to kind of give you the floor, and yeah, tell us about you.
Well, I did not know that story. I thought we had met at the listening room. I remember that. And I remember like when I would play, you would say the problem with, you were like, I love that song. And, but I didn't know the Avicii story. And that makes it, I had full body chills when you were sharing that, because like, it's no mistake, like how God works. Like I say, it's breadcrumbs.
Mhm.
And so the fact that this is your 7th anniversary and you drove all the way listening to that song and somehow ended up at Crosspoint, which somehow in air quotes is a breadcrumb, God. And the funny thing is about that song is the very first service that we did that morning, the production, the front of house sound and the click track were clashing in our ears. And so one by one, the band started to lose it. Like they were like, what's happening here? And so Sam Hawksley was playing rhythm guitar that day, and had it not been for me following him, the rest of the band was like losing it, because they were hearing the front of house sound where the click was in, and it was a lot of things happening in our ears. So it was a miracle that we got through that. And but I love that song, and Aloe Block is like a connected spirit of mine. I love him, I love his voice, and I love his light, his spirit. But thanks for sharing that. And I've seen you several times through Crosspoint, over the years, and you've been just an outstanding champion and photographer, and sharing your gifts, not only there, but just all over, the music community. But when I saw the words beautiful strength, I was like, sign me up, like those are 2 words I like. I don't even know what this is. And then I heard a little bit more about your story. And of course I gravitated to that, because I think that is something each of us find, even if our story's different, it kind of looks just a quarter turn different from each other, like something along the way of, I'll say, my childhood or whatever, like someone has given this statement or moment where it's almost like this internal diagnosis that like you let define you until you choose to like defy it, and so I feel like what my whole life has been is like trying to defy that I couldn't make it, just to show that I could, that passion. So anyway, and obviously since you've launched it for that first shoot, like it's just blown up, and now you have a bus that, so I want to just tip my hat to you, because it's difficult to do this kind of work, and to try to figure out how to, provide. You're an artist as well. But also I have been, the name of a 501c3. I've raised $1 million for needy and battered kids under my own name for like 14 years. So I know the difficulties, and I had a board and stuff, so I never touched money, but I was the face and did all the back work. So kudos to you. And it's all worth the while when the intent is there. And And so the Valentine's Day shoot was great, but like the energy was much different. So I thank you for that and allowing me to sort of come along your path and participate. But I say I'm from Nashville. I've been in Nashville most of my life in one city, but I was born in Eastern Kentucky, about 5.5 hours from here, Catlettsburg. So it's near Ashland, which is the home of the Judds and Billy Ray Cyrus, but a lot of these country music stars up and down, Loretta Lynn, you know, Ricky Skaggs, and on and on. But I've been in Nashville for almost, 18 years.
Okay.
So I was 2 when I moved here, you know. I wasn't 2, but I have been here a long time. And so it's evolved for me. And I've been a lot of things to, oh, can you still see me?
I see your name. There you are.
I've been a lot of things to many people. And then it wasn't enough. So I came to Nashville with a record deal sort of on the table. I'd been coming back and forth, making monthly trips and work with a producer. And that project sort of crumbled because it just wasn't, it was a toxic situation. And it's one of those stories, like you spend a lot of money for someone because they've worked with X, Y, and Z. But I really thought I was going to be signed to a label, and I mean the A&R came just anyway. It was all meant for me to bring in to like come into my power, you know, because I have always tried to like outdo myself to prove to people that I could do this, you know. And what happens is when you're disempowered, anybody that has a little bit of power or control in a position that you think can help move you next, then like you give it to them, you know. And so I've had to spend the last probably like 4 or 5 years really trying to like let go, you know, of the life that I chased outside of myself to find the life that has always been inside myself. And so to fast forward, like I spent, you know, the first probably 14 years in Nashville. I started doing a community night called the Salyers Monday Night Social once a month at the Tin Roof because I couldn't play the Bluebird. I couldn't get in the circles. I couldn't play a lot of these places because I wasn't in the scene. So I was like, well, hell, I'll start my own show, you know. And I had a connection at Tin Roof, and I'll make it free because I can't afford to go to Bluebird and spend $8, you know. And it'll be a community where I pick the writers and sort of connection. And so I did that for 9 years. And before the 10th anniversary, I had to end it because it was no longer enough. And also, I'll tell you why I stopped doing it is because going out of 2015 into 2016, something changed my life. And I walked at Radnor on New Year's Eve in 2015 for no reason or like, I mean, I walked there quite a bit. That's a sacred place. But I just like prayed like, hey, like I want to step into the new year and I want like every dream, every relationship, everything that is not mine for my highest good and service to all, take it all away. Even if I've chased it my whole life, because I'm great at a lot of things, but I want it to be crystal clear what I'm here to do. Like I can go into a room and be a boss and close the deal. You know, I've been executive and like manage like a lot of money, but I'm like, if on stage is like the catalyst for me, but if that's not it, like just take it all away. And it wasn't out of resentment or bitterness or anything. It just like my soul was like, it's time. And that I can't tell you like what happened, like, but by the end of that 1.5 miles, like just weepy tears. I had no music in, and then like for the next 3 years was like a crucifixion of my own life. Like all family had to go away. All friends had, like, I fell off the grid into like, really things were being taken away. This became stronger, you know, which was a good thing. But be careful what you pray for, you know, because the answer is not always kind. However, I believe that it's for our highest good, you know, and it pulls us out of the fear part. So I say that to say the Monday Night Social, what I didn't realize is I was born to a 16-year-old mom and a 17-year-old dad. And so I raised them my whole life. So since I wasn't seen as the kid parents, what did I do when I come to Nashville? Start a Monday Night Social where everyone wants to come to play. Everyone praises me. Everyone wants to be my friend. I recreated this wounded family pattern that I never had in this Monday Night Social. And God's like, yeah, but they are like, you have to heal that, you know? And so that had to end. And, you know, it just so happened that like, I was singing at Crosspoint like for 4.5 years. You know, I've gone to Crosspoint now almost 13 years. But I only served there for probably like 7 years now. But there was a time span from like 2013 on, like 4 or 5 years, where, you know, I would be featured once or twice a month and no one knew my name. And I would just always pray, like, God, just let me show up and leave it on stage, like, and let it happen. So, but I would be in Ubers and like grown ass men would like turn the Uber clock off and just drive and like cry. Like I was going through a divorce and I was sitting there in church and like, you came out, like, have these stories with me. I was in the Miami International Airport waiting to go to Key Largo. And there's a woman who turns around in front of me and she says, oh my gosh, you go to Crosspoint. Miami International Airport is a big airport, okay? And she just like pours into me, like, and God's like, it just is interesting when you are brave enough to want to leave something behind, how God just shows up and shows you the value of like what it truly means for this gift that you've been like designated with, you know? And it wasn't, I was able to receive it without an ego. It was just like, you know, like just mind blown. And these encounters happened at Harris T, like they were happening weekly and it was overwhelming to me. And I'll never forget, I still have this email printed after I think the second time I sang at Crosspoint, someone sent an email to the info@crosspoint.tv. And I want to share this story because I still have the email printed, you know, because I have been in the more valleys in the last probably 5 years than I have in my whole life, okay? And I pull this email out because this lady sends an email and she says, hey, the guy with the long curly hair, I think his name is Steven, but I wanted to share. She said, I'm pregnant and not only I'm crying, but now my husband and my father, who also attend with me, are crying every time he comes on stage and sings. And she said, so to revert from me, like being the crying woman in the lobby to approach him, I just want to email this message to him. I don't know what your story is. And Nashville's filled with a lot of great singers and musicians, but every time you come out, like we feel the other side of that story. Like we feel it from our bones and like God is giving you something special, you know, and like I've never met that woman, but still today, like I read that email every time that I'm like on empty, or every time I'm just like, okay, it's done. Like, you know, I'm tired of chasing. I pull that email out because it's just like, you can't make that up, or like, it's just truth. And so like, I think honestly now, like my voice is stronger than ever, but I think it's because I've liberated like what I thought I needed to do and the expectations that my human side put on me based on people that don't know me, you know, like the thing, like, you know, and then also during that time, I learned about, someone sent me this thing about Joseph Campbell, who I've loved and enjoyed, but it was called The Hero's Journey. And have you ever heard the Hero's Journey?
I haven't.
Okay, so he studied like all these he's the reason like Darth Vader, like, you know, basically he is the philosopher, he's now dead, but like who studied all of like the force within us, each of us. But he talks about the hero's journey, and you should read it. But basically it starts with a call to adventure. And a lot of times the call to adventure for people is a bottom in their life, you know, like they hit rock bottom, but sometimes the call to adventure is not. And so like, but the call to adventure to go on the hero's journey it requires you to leave the path you've always lived to go down this path. And along the way of choosing this path that you haven't lived, like you meet spiritual teachers and, you know, but it requires deep work. And so that opened up a whole rabbit hole. And also with that, like Darth Vader, and a lot of these people are like heroines and heroes and people that we see in like Disney movies, you know, where there's a protagonist and at the end of the movie, whatever. So like, but following the hero's journey, I understood like, okay, like I was born in a town of 4,000 people. why was I given, like, why, like, just asking God why, like, all the questions I asked was like, well, it's not about where you came from. How did a boy from Eastern Kentucky come to bring so much light? You just did, and it's your time. But anyway, I say all that to say, like, during all that internal spiritual work, which has been helpful and difficult, I've like unpacked like what drove choices and why, like, including with family and needing validation from musician friends, because I never got it from my family unless I was raising $1 million under the family name, for a charity cause, and then they could take the pat on the back. So anyhow, and also, like, the Wizard of Oz has always been a spiritual teaching to me. Like, the Bible and the Wizard of Oz are like a close second to each other, because I remember being 7 years old and knowing that Dorothy, like, went down the yellow brick road and brought in the disempowered parts of her life and her friends. Like, I knew on a soul level, like, oh, this is what this is. And, like, at the end of the movie, she's like, and Auntie Anne, you were in the dream and you were there, and they're like, Dorothy, you're crazy. Like, I got it. Like, oh, there's something more here for each of us. But, like, we're told, like, we have to get a job, we have to graduate, we have to do this. We come in on bated breath and we're handed to two people, and then we're like downloading stuff. Mm-hmm. So I've been unwiring stuff for the last 5 years, and it's
exhausting, right?
It's simple and it ain't easy, So fast forward to really, like, where I am at, because that's really, I mean, I'll tell you, like, along the road of Nashville, I got to write with, like, FG, like, all these people that I had dinner, like, at Gavin DeGraw's on Thanksgiving one year. Like, I mean, it was just so interesting how, like, I would attract people that could feel my, not power, but, like, could feel me. Like, they just knew and trusted me. And yet, like, that's why I'm writing this book, the story of my life. If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believed it. Like, having this, our conversation with Little Richard when I was working an event with him, and it was sworn, like, if I tell him I'm a musician, you will be fired, And the whole time I'm there with him, he is reading and he was like, what else do you do? And, like, he was like, can I call you baby boy? I said, call me what? I said, I'm sure I've been called a lot worse, but he was telling me, so all these little vignettes of stories that have happened, including my, role as a philanthropic artist, like, understanding, like, well, I can't just have a writer's night. Like, Whiskey Jam had just started. I had competed with Big Kenny had a night, like, all this stuff. And yet, like, I wasn't trying to compete. I'm like, but what, if I'm going to do this, how can I make it more of an imprint in Nashville to, like, give back in these free nights? And the flood of 2010 happened. And while my home was not affected then, like, literally the day after it happened, everybody was texting me, like, we should do a fundraiser. We should do a charity event. And what they were really saying was, like, you should plan a charity event and we want to play. And so I did, because it's all calls and connections. And so within 2 weeks, I planned, like, we did this Rockin' Through the Rain event at Limelight at the time. It was an all-day thing. And I had lent in all my friends and had rocking chairs and all this stuff. And we raised like $4,000. I mean, not much, but I had volunteered with Hands on Nashville. And I was so impressed how they educate, their volunteers. And they were like, what do you feel comfortable doing? And then it was just, I was like, I want to help them, not the Red Cross, because Red Cross, you don't know exactly where the money goes, but Hands on Nashville, I was blown away. And at the time they had like 4 people in their office. I was like, okay, we'll do this, but it's going to go to Hands on Nashville. We raised like $4,000, which wasn't that much. However, I'm like, okay, Stephen, reach out to the VP of iHeartRadio at the time. Go through your Rolodex, which I still had at the time, and see what business cards you've collected at CRS or over the years that you can challenge a corporate company to match this, So one of the cards I had was from the director of marketing from Clorox Bleach. And I knew that we had met at a CRS party, but this is a handshake town, and if there's like booze involved, people may not remember you, but I emailed him and 2 iHeartRadio, senior level and one other corporate company hey, this is what Nashville's gone through. My friends and I raised $4,000. I'm trying to challenge to see if one of you all will match that so we can compliment and give Hands on Nashville a bigger check. Fast forward, no response. So I gave $4,000 to Hands on Nashville. And one night I get this random text and was like, hey, Steven, it's Drew from Clorox. I'm at the station inn. And at the time I lived right beside the station. He said, I'm going to see Bob Snyder at 3rd and Lindsley. And I was like, I can pick you up. He was like, no, I'm going to grab a taxi. I was like, well, I'll go, I said, I live right next door. So I picked him up, and in the car, he says, I think we're going to help you. I was like, I'm sorry. And he said, first off, I did remember who you were. He was like, you're kind of unforgettable. He was like, but we're going to send you a check for $4,000. And so it was just, God was like covered in chills. All it took was me asking, and so I was like, well, why stop there? So anyway, that has been my whole, literally a life of service, to show up and give, whether it's my vocal talent or call or connection, because it makes such a big difference, and so fast forward to where I'm at in this last 2 years of season. I had planned last January the 5th, I had a strategy plan for 6 months of 3 songs are going to go out, and I've been writing, and I collaborated with Izzy Devine, who was a fill-in guitarist for my band at the time. But he and I had no karmic energy together, which means I realized oh, he's not my family. I'm like a rescue cat. I only play with people I want to, because I'm are they my family coming back in? Because because I've fired 2.5 bands because I brought in again that energy, and to be self-aware is very difficult as an artist, but it's also while I'm here to wield this power, and so anyway, he had moved from New York, and we started writing together as well as playing together, and it was so fun. I had a residency at FGL House for 2.5 years. Early on Fridays, we opened the club actually. People would fly from Indianapolis 5 times a year, Florida, just to see us play our Friday 6 o'clock show. I remember walking out, and because I would play 3 hours, and then I would literally grab my to-go food, get a lift, and get home, and the band would stay and listen, to fans or the people. And I'm like, no, they just got a free show, but I would start getting ready for the shows at 1, treating it like the Super Bowl, and but I remember walking out to my lift one night, and this lady says, hey, we just flew from Southern California, and a lady on Southwest Airlines says, the stewardess, she says, where are you going tonight in Nashville? She said, we're only there for 2 nights. She said, give me your phone. And she scrolled. She said, she opened your Instagram. She said, you have to go see this guy tonight if you don't go anywhere else. And she said, well, I don't know what he sounds like, but he looks good, so we're going to go. And so I laugh because I'm like, wait a minute. Someone from Southwest Airlines is 40,000 feet in the air telling this guest from California to come see me? That changed everything. And I would be there for the joy of us all, and I tell my band, this is your show. I'm the front man name, but I need you all to know that you have 100% realtor of real estate of this also, I really have a band that's all artists, so that's why it shocks people. We do all these songs that inspired us, Michael and Prince and stuff, and then my own stuff, but they're all artists, and I really have they have full reign. So, but that ended because I cost a lot of money, and they didn't want to pay me a lot after 2.5 years. But it was also time for me to focus on putting my own stuff out there finally, because also, Annette, I'm happy to admit my failures and fears, and one is not finishing. I recognize I've started even the project with the country producer, I didn't finish, and so here I am with these original songs, and I'm you haven't finished, I haven't completed, and so I am vulnerable and aware enough to be that is part of my insecurity, and so I was okay, I'm letting go of this gig, and so I scheduled out the release in 2020 of the 3 songs, potentially 4. And January felt like a damn year last year. It's my birthday month, but it felt like a whole year. And then March 2nd, I went to bed to a text from one of my dear friends. It said 1111 wink, and 1111 is like my lucky number, but God number. But I remember falling asleep to that, and I had seen the weather, and I was like, yeah, but downtown won't get a tornado because I've always been told the way the skyline's designed, like it wouldn't do it. You know, I was like, went to bed with Spirit, my dog. And at 12:45, I woke up to my windows busting out and the freight train whistle and the fire alarm, like the shock of like, holy shit, this is happening. And the first thing I did was what they've taught us not to do, walk to the window, you know, and I saw just insulation and lumber and like just everything. And I'm like, in my whole life, there's 2 things I'm afraid of, possums or 1.
Okay.
Tornadoes are the second. Because of the Wizard of Oz, because of Twister, like that's always been a fear. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is happening. And so like I was paralyzed in my living room, like my neighbors beating on the door. My loft is like less than 700 square foot. It sucked all the moisture out of the whole loft. So I couldn't even speak when my neighbor said, are you okay? Like nothing would physically come out. But I remember like not being afraid that I was going to die. And I remember praying like, God, let me lean into this. And I don't even know why, but I'm like, let me lean into this because there is grace here. And I'm mortified. And my neighbor's like, get out, get out, get out. He's like got MacGyver flashlight on, like he's packing his stuff. And I'm like, I just grabbed the dog. I left my wallet and everything because I wasn't for sure like, if the building's on fire, like I wasn't able to like process. But for 7 minutes, I stood, and like 7's a lucky number. And for me, one that I'll never forget because it might as well have been 7 years. Standing here paralyzed, like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And the freight train whistle sound that they all like talk about, like still like wakes me up in the middle of my sleep, you know? And so everything changed March the 3rd, you know, because at that point it was in the morning of March the 3rd and I was raw. I'm triggered by people and like in general, and I have a rescue dog who's triggered by dogs and babies. So we're all down on the first floor, some in the laundry room, and I'm holding her like literally like, cause she'll go, she's abandoned, she'll run. And just thinking like, and my neighbor comes out and she's like, I have Twitter and it says another one's coming in 3:30. I'm like, well, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm leaving, you know, like I got to get out of here. And so a friend of mine lives about 1.25 miles up the street. She called and said, hey, my electric's out, but like there's no Airbnbers, like you all are welcome to come here. So I picked my 55-pound dog up and I carried that bitch up 1.25 miles because I didn't want to step on glass. And it was like Gotham City, like nothing but black, you know, all the way up there. And I thought I need to call my mom. And that's a whole nother story because my mom and my dad are still like, ugh. I mean, we have a recovering relationship, but my mom at the time lived with her parents and my dad at the time lived with his parents. But I didn't want my grandparents to wake up and see national news. And wonder if I was alive. So I called my mom's cell phone and I put it in my pocket carrying that dog. And she answered and she said, and I'm like crying. I was like, I'm okay. You know, like I wasn't expecting an answer at that time because they're an hour later. And at that time it was like, gosh, 1:30 or 2. And I said, hey, I'm okay. I'm okay. And she said, oh, it's okay. You know, and she probably thought I was in jail. I said, there's just been a really bad tornado. And my home is gone. But I wanted you to know when you all wake up tomorrow, like, we're okay, you know. And she said, Steven, it's so weird because like your grandmother is like downstairs, she couldn't go to sleep. Like, she's like stir crazy, and I couldn't go to sleep. Like, I was going to watch TV, and it was almost like I needed to be awake to get this call, you know? And so, like, I mean, I am an empath. I feel everything and every person. And so it's great and it's challenging, you know, especially when trauma comes, because I thought, my gosh, all the stuff I've defeated, like, whew, I'm Hulk Hogan over here, you know, until something like that happens and you realize you're not in control. And someone once described trauma as too much, too fast, too soon, you know? So like when it happens, you don't expect it, but it's like, it's a lot, you know? And so the next day, like I walked down when the daylight came up and looked at the building. I mean, it was just like, you know, and then 2 days later, it was Thursday, and there's all of a sudden volunteers here to move everybody out. And I literally could not get in my place. Like, they would not allow anybody out until like that Thursday. But people were here moving that are my friends, artists from the music business, like, and like, I just was like still super raw and scorned. Even people from Crosspoint were here, and they didn't know I lived here. And so a lot of people were like, Stephen, I thought you were there helping people move. Like, I had no idea, like, you went through this. And I say that in that because, like, I did not post on Facebook. Like, I'm not one to, like, cry victim, you know, like that. I just feel like if I believe that everything is everything, then I have to trust God, even in the moments that are most painful, that I would not wish again in my life. I have to trust on that level of faith lived, you know? And so, but a few weeks later, and dealing with FEMA, like, I mean, it's just, my home was really the only thing. It was, I said to people, like, Nashville was no longer sexy to me. Like, there was nothing inspiring me here anymore except my home. And then God was like, and guess what? That's gone. And so it was almost like the completion of something. And, but yet, like, realizing I'm never been in control, you know, but like, I mean, it really, really like rocked me, like, you know, and I probably should have gone to like get some counseling, you know, and I may still do it, but 3 weeks later, we go in isolation and everyone has to stay home. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, I don't have a home, you know, like, so that is like healing trauma. But fortunately, like, I stayed, you know, a friend offered her space for a week, and, you know, friends offered up their space. And then I stayed like in Franklin for almost a month. And April 10th, all I could do on lockdown was like walk the dog or go for runs around this, what I called the concrete neighborhood. Like, it's just all blocks. And I'm on a run April 10th. And I like have this big like God moment of like, I won't even go into that, but it's powerful. So I like type it in my phone. I'm walking, taking a breath, and I'm 4 or 5 steps back into my run, and I face plant the ground, my phone, and I break my middle finger on my left hand, so like a Beetlejuice break. Like, one half goes this way, it's like bad. And it lightly snowed that day, and I remember picking it up, like getting it out of shock and popping my bone back into place. I'm left-handed, and I love to journal. I love to write notes, like, and I'm like, oh my God, like, but all of a sudden I am like, I can't tell anybody because like, they're going to be like, what's God trying to teach you? Like, seriously, I had shame on myself with a broken middle finger. Like, that's how wounded I am, you know, that's how. And so like, again, trauma, and then there's come more trauma. So I'm like convincing myself, okay, first off, I look around, make sure nobody saw me, get my phone, and I'm like convincing myself, okay, I can duct tape my finger. Like, I ain't going to a hospital, you know. I was like talking myself down off the ledge and afraid to even tell anyone, like, I have broken my finger, you know, like, that's, do you know how sad that is? So I'm like, okay, if I have to call my friend Sharp, like, to help me, because, you know, take this up, like, so by the time I get back to where I'm staying, like, God's like, you have insurance right now, you need to go to the ER. So I get in the car, take myself to the ER, and 2 surgeries later, you know, I have a fixed finger, and it's still messed up. Like, I can't make a full fist, but I can write again. And then throughout 2020, like during the whole like lockdown, you know, I think it was a gift for the collective, because like I enjoy sitting with myself, and like I am so attuned that it's a gift and yet a challenge, because like it's almost psychic level, you know, like, but I think the gift that it gave everyone was like, you can't go anywhere except at home and listen to the voice that's speaking when no one else is in the room. You know, I will say I was so touched by you because you like brought me dog food for Spirit. And I like, that just meant the world to me, because like, she's the only thing that matters to me, you know? And like the fact that you like, were like, does she need dog food? Like, was like meant more than you'll ever know, you know? And so I'm still catching up on thank you notes, and yours will come. But I also wanted to tell you, after the first photo shoot, I wanted to send you a thank you, because I mean, I just enjoy writing notes when someone offers service, like, not because I need to, but that was one thing I was taught as a young teenager and intern, was like, always write a thank you note if anybody gives you a meeting or coffee. And I like to do it, and people like receive it and they love it. But like, I bought you this pillow at Rite Aid that was a unicorn that was like, and I never shipped it and it got ruined, but I wanted to send you that as a thank you note. But anyway, I digress. So where am I at?
I was trying to get
Isolation. So do what?
so I like those as well. I like just bought a bunch and sent them out.
Yeah, and I'm still writing the tornado ones, the birthday ones, and everything. But like,
you know that tornado was the very first trip that Atticus did, like as a servant vehicle.
Really?
Yeah, so I picked it up in Murfreesboro after it had gotten fixed, and then we did a little Murfreesboro drive for tornado victims, which was, I don't want to say it was hilarious, but it was the amount of toilet paper and paper towels, and then somebody gave us that big thing of dog food, and I was like, oh my god, I know who would want that.
Yeah.
And then like a week later, all of Nashville was like out of toilet paper, and I was like, oh, I had so much.
Yeah. And it's so funny. You're from Iowa, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I do want to share this, because I haven't shared this with anybody except for like 2 friends. Immediately, like the day that I moved what was salvaged from my place into storage, which I still have a fee to pay, but my banker calls me from Pinnacle, and he says, Steven? I said, yeah. He said, hey, so there's, from my hometown in Iowa, there's a car lot, a car dealership. They did this for Hurricane Harvey, but they want to send 10 Jeep Wranglers to Nashville for tornado. And it's my like dream car for tornado victims, that like, just for like a month or 2 months, just to like get them off their feet. Like, would you need, and I'm like, I said, David, like, I can't take much more. If this is not going to happen, like, I can't, you know, he was like, no, you have one of the 10. And I'm like, yes. And so like this town in Iowa, like Pritchard, their name's Pritchard Dealership. And he's like their hometown, like paper boy. So like, he's just, you know, like been a family friend all the years, but he's my friend and he's a songwriter, but also he's my Pinnacle banker. And so they sent 10 like Jeep Wranglers and Dodge Rams like down on a semi for 10 victims to like just have for 30 days or 60 days. But mine was for 6 months because of Corona. And I can't even tell you, like, I got to take that dog, like, we would go, like, when I would start getting anxiety, I was like, take her to the dog park. She loved it, you know, and I'm like, this feels like my car. But they left me a note inside that Jeep that was like, we're from the Midwest, and we know a thing or two about tornadoes, and we are so sorry what you experienced, but maybe this will help you. Like, I mean, like, and I was so overwhelmed I didn't post it on social media, but like, I cannot even tell you like the freedom and just the grounding that they gave me, the generosity of that, you know? And I didn't do a GoFundMe, or like, I didn't know how to do anything in that. Like I was in my feelings, you know? So fast forward, I did release 3 songs that were like my introduction, my pop music when the world shut down. And here is what I know for sure. Like, because I am like a control guy and I can make stuff happen. Like the first song was called No Interference that I wrote, and it's spelled INTERFEARANCE. Was like was when Corona just happened. And so I released it Good Friday. And I'm like, but nobody's going to hear this. You know, like there's no momentum, like there's nothing that I'm going to get from this. And God's like, Stephen, this has never been about you. Mm-hmm. You need to release this art and allow it to find the hearts that need it. You know, and so like I put out 3 songs in 2020 when the world was shut down. And I'm proud of that, you know, because they honestly have carried me through, just like when I felt like I'm nothing, like just play those songs and I feel joy again, you know? Yeah. And they really helped heal the brokenness. They are the truth, like that came through. And the second song was called The Truth, and it has the F word in the hook. But it caught on with so many, my people love that song. And actually a friend of mine, Josiah, who's a event planner, he started doing like these worship nights in his backyard, like just for like neighbors. And he asked me like, hey, would you want to come and this was over the summer and do a couple of I was like, dude, I'm down. They were called Thirst. He lost his job. I'm like, you know, and so I went out there, but he would make a playlist as people were coming in of like music, and he played The Truth. And I'm like, bro, it was like, that has the F word in the hook. He was like, but the truth is the truth, right? Like that kind of, I was like, I love you so much. And then, you know, there's the Razor Blade I put out in October, which I'm proud of those songs, and I'm writing towards finishing the EP. And it's the greatest work, honestly, I feel like I've ever done. But another story about The Truth is, or about Razor Blade is, I took a restaurant gig again, right at the week after the tornado, because I needed a sense of normalcy. I've worked for myself for the last 7 or 8 years. And somebody offered me like a weekend gig. I was like, yes, I need something to look forward to. And so the day I released Razor Blade, I'm like, my back is to the bar and I'm doing my receipts. And there's another Steven that works at my restaurant. And he's telling the couple sitting at the bar, like, oh, Steven's a musician. He released a song today. And they're like, oh, cool. What's his name? He was like Steven Salyers. And she said, oh my gosh, like I used to intern for a guy who was best friends with a Steven Salyers, who was an artist, and he passed. His name was Eric. Okay. Eric was one of my best friends who passed when he was 30 of a heart attack, like on the spot. But he had told me, like, if I had $1 million, I would give you every penny, because that's what I believe that much in you. And she said, and I turned her, like, as soon as she said it, like, I was just struck, you know, and I like, whew, tears just start coming down. And I turned around, I was like, that was me. And she, like, it's overwhelming to think about, but like, again, God always is showing up. And I always say, like, coincidences or God being anonymous, you know? And so when those like ping, ping, pings happen, which they happen all the time for me, and I follow them, it really leads to something else. A lot of people let them go. They're like, oh, synchronicity. Oh no, like it's powerful. And I could not hold back tears, even with a mask on. And her boyfriend he didn't know what to do. And she just grabbed my hands. She said, well, first off, like, had it not been for him, I wouldn't have my own entertainment law firm, you know, like, because I interned there. And she said, I'll tell you, like, he believed in you. And like, just, it was so powerful in that. And I have to believe that even in like our most painful moments that feel like the valley or feel like uncertainty, that like God sends us reminders, you know, in the flesh or in texts or in signs. I mean, signs, birds and signs are one of my thing, because, you know, there was a time where I was still like iffy about the church that I attended for so long, you know, like, and it's funny because I've reconnected with Pete Wilson, and I'm actually doing his Dream Year plan, which is he's coaching for 12 months. And it's funny because a lot of the people that are participating in Dream Year all know him from Crosspoint, you know, but there was a time where, you know, I even recognized, like, I don't know that everyone's welcome if the guy who planted this, you know, like I had that conversation. And so, but faith what I know for sure is faith has taught me it has to be lived. You know, it's learned in pews, and it's learned in all the scriptures and stuff that we learn as a kid all the way up, but also it has to be lived in order to like really sink in. And so I think if there's anything that like my life is given as a service, it is that I'm like faith-filled versus like fearless, you know? So like, and I still recognize when fear comes in, like, I'm like, oh, this is fear, you know, and I'll let that go because I'll always dive into the dagger of fear, because on the other side of fear is, you know, our greatest fear comes in to free our greatness, you know? And so if I choose not to answer the call when the credit card collector calls, I'm like, I know. And when I have it, you'll have it, you know, instead of declining it, because that's fear-based. I know I don't have it, but when I have it, you will have it. Like falling into the dagger of that every time, because I know like there's nothing I have to worry about, you know, like from the cradle to the grave, I didn't come in with anything. And when I go out, I can't take a U-Haul with all this or none of this, you know? So it sort of keeps me bookmarked between what do I want right now? What inspires me right now? Like, what do I want, you know? And really just asking those questions and listening, because the answer is always there. It comes. But what happens is we are like in this system of Instagram and all the like what's stocking up. Like the answer is not truth, you know? And so I think that the answer is always awaiting us for our arrival, and that everything that we know to be true for ourselves, for our dreams, our desires, our pursuits, are all waiting for our arrival. But like life happens along the way, and so we think we have to exhaust ourselves to make $50 or whatever, and that's just not the truth, you know? So that's where I'm at right now, and it feels good to be there, you know? And I want to be on stages, and I want to be in movies, and I want to do a lot of things. And what I know for sure is like I trust God's timing, and not like the convicting God, but I trust that the timing of it all is happening as it's planned, even if it's unconventional. Like I'm not as young as I was when I first came to town with a record deal on the table, but God's like, yeah, but I'm the one who scheduled the dream, you know? So let me show up when you choose to show up.
Yeah. Oh, this was amazing. Well
Yeah.
done. And I have always been inspired by you. Like I know, I mean, the Crosspoint thing, of being able to see you, or like when I saw you at the listing room, I was just like, this is a dude that I kind of want to like get to know. Like, you know how you feel that way when you meet people, like every once in a while, you come across people where you're like, oh, this person's good, but whatever. But then you have certain people that come across that are like, I think there's some connection there, whether or not it's like just inspirational or if it's like creative. I don't know what it is, but there was something about you where I was like, I really want to know that dude.
Mm,
And then to know like years later, it's like, and in my mind, I'm like, look at success. Like this is success. This guy's
right.
making it. He's got the tin roof thing. He's got the listening room. He's on
Mm,
stage at Crosspoint. You're connected in the community. Everybody seems to love you. And like nothing is more like encouraging than hearing somebody be like, you know what, I fought for that every day, and it was a battle, or it was something that like even now you're working through and healing, where it's like, wow, you just shine
yeah.
through it, even though you're not, I don't want to say winning, you're definitely winning, but like
Yeah.
feel like it.
Yeah. It's
So
like
that's
we put out, you know. Can I share with you two quick things really quick? Because it would be not fair for me not to share the unpretty side of the most recent parts of my story. So I'll leave you with two things. One is, because this is a happy note. So in December, I had a friend text me to see if I could help her friend who is a domestic violence survivor find a home, apartment. I don't know her story or anything, but like I knew her first name and knew she had a job and whatever. And I said, I'll try. So I sort of reached out to a couple of my friends at apartment complexes. And it looked like actually the apartment I was staying in temporarily in East Nashville while my Germantown place got back open, that maybe like she could just take over that, you know, and she didn't have transportation, but she like has a job, you know, she had everything lined up. And I thought, my gosh, why couldn't she just take over the lease or whatever? And that fell through. They were like, well, she can move in May. I'm like, she's ready to start now. Like she, you know, like that's not fair, you know? So, you know, and then I moved back to Neverland, my Neverland nest, December 28th. And so like, I sort of lost track and I felt like, well, maybe they'll get her a place. And then she reached out to me February 7th, like beginning of February and said, hey, Steven, do you know anybody else? And I had just happened to like, the place I live in has a couple other properties and they were like, hey, we need to fill 2 spots. Do you know anybody? I was like, link them up. Okay. February 7th, she said, I'm doing a walkthrough and my unit is 309. And that's the unit number that is my unit number. Okay. So she's getting to walk through a different apartment building that happens to be the same apartment number that I live in.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, everything is everything or it's not. And then she sent me a picture of the keys, like, and she's like, thank you so much. Like, and I'm like, congratulations, you know, like, this is your new chapter. And so I thanked the person that like gave her the walkthrough and I was like, and they were like, Steven, you would have thought I walked her into a Green Hills mansion. Like she was so ecstatic. And so like, I knew because I had to tell them she had a job, like I knew where she worked and sort of the time, but I don't even know what she looks like or like anything. So Valentine's Day, I went to see my friend Damien and Jackie Wilson play, which I shouldn't have, but I enjoyed it. And then I got my tail back to Germantown and I'm like, I should get some water and some Red Bull. So I go up to the gas station and you can't go in because it's after 10. And like, so I order my water, my Red Bull through the window. And there's 2 homeless people and they're like, do you have any money? Cause I mean, like, I'm the Target with a fur coat on. Like, and I was like, I have nothing extra to give. I'm sorry. And so she brings up the water and the Red Bull. And I said, are you Nikki? And she said, I am. I said, I'm Steven. She starts welling up. She said, can I come out and hug you? And it was this beautiful moment on Valentine's Day. Like she puts her mask on and she runs out and like hugs me, holds me. And I'm like, it's so damn good to be like, she said, you have no idea. I was like, I don't need to know. But like, it was just so like overflowing, like just amazing for me because again, she came back up and I didn't know what she looked like or anything. And that's not her real name, by the way, you know, like that's her safe name. And, but she didn't have a name tag on. I was like, but I knew, you know, and I said, are you? And she was so elated in that. And like, that has given me hope because I've had some really blue days, you know, but, I will say my mother and father, part of my story also is that I learned a couple of years ago, they are now felons, you know, and just were part of this pretty extreme situation that I didn't know anything about because we were disconnected for several years for my own health. But my mother has since like been, you know, out of my grandparents' house, and starting at the end of December, she called me asking to come live with me. And that can't happen because like, it's like triggered me because I'm like, the explosion happened. I couldn't call anybody on Christmas, you know, and like here my mother's like, I need a favor. Can I come stay with you? And I'm like, I've lived by myself for all these years, you know, and I'm like, she said, because like, this is the date, but I'm going to be with my bike and my belongings on the street, you know, and I don't want to be in the cold. And I'm like, Mother, I said, I'm moving, but like, let me think through this. Like, I don't know, like, you know, but it paralyzed me again because I'm like, I don't want to like think about my own mother being on the street, you know. And so I called my grandparents and like, it's not well, you know, and same thing with my dad, even though my relationship with him is different because she lied on behalf of my lying dad to, you know, but I was also the referee breaking up them fighting every night and like, not calling the police. Like, I mean, I was like literally like not their kid, but like, you know, this sort of like referee, and also singing in the car as we drove away, like from my beating dad, you know, to Rate Our Love. And so my mother has like put me in this position of like, have you thought about letting me come down there? You know, like just pressuring me. And it's been so difficult because one, I have not shared any part of my family life with anyone from church you know, or in general, because it's not like there's not a victim or hero here. But it's difficult because I do look like I have it together. I do look like I'm, you know, a celebrity. And yet, like, there's some days my bank account's negative, but I'm also a human being, you know? And so, and also, like, there is this toxic positivity out there, this situation where people are like, well, that's your mother and father, like, you have to take care of them. And I'm like, well, actually, like, they didn't take care of me, you know? And so it has been difficult because, you know, I know that, like, my birthday was January 24th. Hers is the 28th. And I sent her Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday voice memo. She loved it, you know, and, but then she asked me again by text, like, have you thought more about this? And I think it's just been interesting for me to, like, really trust that God's got her like God's had me, you know?
Mhm.
And also, like, even if I don't understand or can ever sort of communicate to anybody else, which I don't need to, but, like, again, like, we have to come to this place where you lean into God, you know, that, like, your faith and what happens, in order for your life to become better, you have to face those moments of that you want to push away or wish away, you know? And so it's not all perfect. It's not, as I said, the Kardashian life, and even their life is difficult. But I struggle with not responding or not giving her the response that a good Christian man would, you know, like doing the things, but I'm doing it out of my own protection.
Mhm.
And I know that, like, as long as I honor my truth, I honor your truth, and it, like, is in service to her truth, you know? And so, but I'm also a human being. And so I go back to that little boy and just honor when tears come or songs come, honor that it's all perfect, even when it's not.
Right. Oh, I think that is a great line to probably end on. And I, you're such a connector. Like you know, a lot of people go through um, life just like you're connecting one person to another person to another person. And I really feel like you have a serious gift with that too. So, um, oh, that just like I have like literal chills from everything that you've said today. And I I'm really grateful that we have been connected together and that you were willing to come on and share, especially things that you haven't talked about too. Like uh that's super respectful. I'm really glad that you were able to do that. And I really like the amount of people, like the whole reason why this is called Beautiful Strength is that, you know, life can be very messy. Um, and it takes a super amount of strength to get through it, but it can also be very beautiful. And you make, I don't want to say you make a messy life look beautiful, but you are willing to go through the messy to get to the beautiful, you know? And I think I'd really appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Yeah.
And now I'm
And then,
like coked up.
oh,
It was
well,
so
you
good.
also, you also recognize that the messy actually always has been beautiful, even if it doesn't seem that way, you know? But just know I'm always rooting you on. I have been, and it's been a privilege to participate with your podcast today.
Oh,
Thank
thank you. I can't wait to do an event. Like one of these days I'm gonna have a big event and you can come play it and we
I
can
know. I feel like Beautiful Strength needs like a festival with Atticus. Like, once we can do that again, you know.
yes, yes, yes. And you are on the top of the list for being invited to
I will
it.
be.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go and I can't wait to share this with other people.
Thank
So
you.
hold
Keep
on.
shining